Imagine a world where you are part of a community that sees you for all that you bring and propels you to become your very best self. A world where everyone is valued for what they bring and everyone gets the support they need. Savor Exchange brings this dream to reality by empowering individuals, communities, and organizations with the right tools and resources to change the world. We do this by organizing people near and far around a goal or project and bringing them together and measuring their success. Our data analytical reports will provide information to support transparency and critical needs in today's world. The SaverX app acts as a secure bridge to multiple communities, including those defined by you, and allows everyone within their community to contribute time through service and request help for themselves. Members can also donate service credits, money, or goods back to their community. Go to www.saverxapp.com to learn more and start your Saver community today.
My name's Martin Farrell, and with Marianne Hartley, Jane Cockrell and David Bishop, we've just completed the session on generosity and gratitude and how one can regenerate happiness by generosity and gratitude. We had a fantastic session and we thought we'd re-record the first bit so that you can get a condensed version of this gratitude and generosity session. The first thing to say is this was all made possible by the Savor Exchange. Give what you love and get what you need to get things done. So a big shout out for the Savor Exchange. We did a word cloud to start with. And we said, what words come to mind when you hear the word gratitude? People put in the words and we generated a word cloud. And then we did the same thing. What words come to mind when you think of generosity? Word cloud of generosity. And that sort of set the scene for us really of the rest of the session. There was a lot of richness just in those few moments of arriving. And then we, or I rather, having arrived, everybody then went into receive mode, and I gave some input before going into groups and then harvesting all that richness from the groups and then saying our farewells. So what we said was prototype, that this is part of a prototype in which there's a group of us wanting to grow generosity, or for people to choose generosity, so that there's just more and more of it, and it expands and expands. And this seed was planted. The idea first appeared partway through 2020. And we're now working as part of one of the programs at the Presencing Institute. Look it up. That program is called ULAB 2X. It's running from February to May. So we're now partway through that. And it's an incubator program, an accelerator program for social change and innovation. And there are 380 groups, of which we are one. The others are dealing with all sorts of other things, all sorts of cool, really good stuff. Ours is about generosity, gratitude, and all the good things that come from that. There is a core and an extended team. The core team, the ones who are putting time and energy into driving it. The extended team are people with more or less time to be able to spend on it, but a high level of interest. So this session that we ran was part of this prototype. We're making some assumptions, and here they are. Our assumption is that generosity is innate, i.e. it's there for all of us. It's part of who we are as human beings. It is innate. Therefore, we think it is abundant. There's lots and lots of it. In fact, it is, I don't know about endless, but there's certainly enough to go around. It is abundant. There's masses of generosity potential in the store cupboard of human beings. It's universal. It's everywhere. It goes beyond cultures. It will be expressed in different ways. and it's through different times, but it's universal in time and space. Core economy. There's a core economy here of giving and of people giving to each other and receiving and making human connections. And that runs alongside a money economy, which I can't imagine we could do without. There's lots of downsides, but it's there. The core economy has such value. So we're making that assumption that this is a good thing, and that's part of what this whole endeavor is supporting. We're also making an assumption that being generous helps make you happy. Happier you are, the deeper that goes, the more joy you have in your life, which is not subject to the day-to-day ups and downs. Could be happy one day, miserable the next. But if you have joy, it's something which is more solid at a deeper level. So this session is happening on International Happiness Day. So that's Seaver Exchange chose a good day, didn't they, really? So we put that up there. Innate. There are choices to be made. Choices. You can make a choice. I can make a choice about gratitude. Either I see my glass half full or half empty. I can see today as being a cloudy, miserable day. I wish it wasn't cloudy on a Saturday. Or I can see it, oh, it's a warmer day today. And indeed, maybe it'll rain later and it'll water the plant. So just to see the positive, that's a choice of gratitude, realizing what we have rather than what we don't have. Also, ego to eco. Let me explain. Ego is me, basically. And the me might extend to me and my family. The me might extend to me, my family, and my immediate neighbors, or some of them, or my community, or my town, or the people who look like me, or the people who talk like me, or the people who, whatever else, think like me, or maybe people in my office or something. Me. Eco is more than that. It's knowing that we are all connected and seeing a sort of eco level connection. And it's relevant for gratitude and generosity, because if I have ego, then I would give, but I give to my immediate family, let's say, or just to one or two people close to me. With an eco perspective, I'm willing to give to all because I see the benefit that there is for all, and as part of that, the benefit there is for me. So choices about these things leads to our propensity to be generous. Choices. What are the conditions that could be created that help people be more generous? Well, one is an example. I see other people being generous. I think, oh, that's good. Oh, well, they're being generous. I'll be generous. Or maybe I think of my family. Oh, my granny was generous. My auntie was generous. My mum, dad were generous. My brother's generous. I think of people who are close to me and part of my history, and that has given me an example of being generous. But also I see people around me being generous. Being noticed. If I'm generous and someone notices, that somehow encourages me to be more generous. Oh, someone noticed, someone appreciated what I did. I may notice that being part of something bigger is something which is energizing for me. A pandemic, for example, or some kind of crisis. I want to contribute to that bigger thing. I want to do something about that bigger thing. It helps me and encourages me to be generous. I want to be part of that bigger story. Reciprocity. This is where it speaks to the ego, eco. Reciprocity, if I give something, I might get something back. On a personal level, if I give something to my friend, sooner or later, something will come back, probably from that friend, probably to me. But it's also broader than that. It might be within a community, in a time bank, for example, that within a time bank, people are sharing with each other. Several hundred or more people are sharing within a community, and they get something back, but from somebody else, not from the gift to whom not from the person to whom they were generous, but somebody else. Or some people would give and think, one day it'll come back, because I know we're all connected. So it will come back to me somewhere, sometime. Reciprocity, which also seems to be hardwired into us, really. This is what I showed in the meeting, and I've now slightly revised it because it makes it look much too sort of arithmetic, really, which is 10% of people will be generous anyway. 10% of people could never be persuaded to be generous because they're just not like that. And 80% of people in the middle are the ones who might be persuaded if you get those conditions right. And actually, I don't think it's quite like this. I just think there are some people right up here who are just in their nature, regardless of what the conditions are around them, they will just be generous, big-hearted, and giving. They just are. They just do that anyway. There's probably other people at the bottom, and you can choose your own examples of people who will probably, whatever you do, never be generous because they're entirely thinking of themselves. You may think of people on a political level who are like that. You may think of close associates who are just, they're just not going to. So there's a sort of gradation here, which the 10, 80, 10 doesn't really speak to, but you get the idea. Some people who will do it anyway, other people who won't do it anyway. The great mass of us are probably somewhere in the middle here. Let's put that one up there. So having given that short presentation, we then went into groups which were not recorded, and then we came back and had a rich sharing. The question that people were thinking about in groups was, what has inspired me to be generous, and in which giving that, doing that, making that generous act has made me happy? What has inspired me to do that? And it's really speaking to this. What were the conditions that were there which helped me be generous? So that's the part that you're now going to see. You're going to be transported magically by this technology into our last 20 minutes discussion in the group. There were a dozen of us. It was a good, rich discussion, and that's what's happening right now. Sharing. Let's have some harvesting now. What is it that came up in your groups? What are the conditions that need to be in place for generosity to grow and to multiply? And maybe we could start, I'd take your guidance here, Marianne, Jane, David. Maybe you could start the discussion. We'll start with one group and then we'll open to the whole, to that group, and then we'll come to the second group. Should we start, Jane, with you?
Great, no problem. Well, I have to say I had a fantastic group with me, and we said some extremely clever things in a very short space of time.
Of course you did, of course you did.
But I will do my best to summarize. And I think what was really interesting was we actually were looking at a couple of the kind of not tensions, but dynamics between whether or not this is something, generosity is something that we are born with, or is something that is kind of taught to us when we're young, and actually how we come to be generous. And there were folks in the group who felt that they probably had the benefit of maybe being in that natural kind of 10% naturally generous group, but also maybe some of the risks around exactly so. Some of the risks around that in terms of the challenge for overgiving, and the possibility that sometimes if you're in that group, that generosity may not always equate in that moment with happiness, although in the longer term it probably would. So that was very interesting. Just discuss some of the dynamics around generosity, and also what we talked about was ourselves being resourced enough to be generous. Rengin brought up the example of the oxygen mask. You have to be feeling yourself to be resourced, feel confident, feel valued, generous towards yourself before you're able to give to others. So that was something else that we also had a spectrum of opinions on, whether or not actually that's something that we could be generous in spite of those feelings, or whether or not that's the place from which greater generosity flows. So that was the kind of shape of our conversation. So I won't say any more for now, because everyone had specific examples that they brought up which were excellent. So I'd like to ask the rest of the group if they've got anything that they'd like to either put me straight on or put into the plenary now.
Let's do that. Let's hear from anybody else who was in the same group as Jane. just unmute yourself and speak if you so choose.
This is Pam. The only comment I would add is that if for the recording, the reference to oxygen mask was take care of yourself. If you're a parent, for example, take care of yourself with oxygen before you worry about giving oxygen to the children next to you or whoever else. So it's referring to a plane, I think, that example.
Very good. So there's a clarity there. And under those extreme circumstances, which I don't know if any of us have been in those circumstances, hopefully not, and hopefully we wouldn't be in the future. Jane, would you like to identify anybody else who was in your group, or would anybody else in the group that Jane was in like to speak?
I'm not sure if Sal or Blossom would like to add anything. Blossom, you're muted.
Blossom, you're muted.
Oh, Sal, you?
Thank you, Jen. I think you summarized it very well and reflected what we said in the group.
I think you've summed up the concept accurately. I think if you go to specific things people said, when we reach that stage, perhaps I could comment further.
Great, thank you. I think I'll sign off there then, Marianne, and see if Marianne's group can beat us.
Oh, well, there we are. That's interesting.
Oh, I didn't realize it was a competition about generosity and gratitude, but we had a very generous group, and we focused really on appreciation seemed to be at the heart of generosity, and like how small acts can have a ripple effect and a bigger impact and touch. You know, it might be that you're just smiling at someone walking down the street, but actually they're, you know, when they receive that makes them feel good. So having an act that has an impact, a positive impact on somebody else, seemed to be a real motivation and a drive for acts of generosity, and that can be small or bigger. So, or as it was Red Nose Day in the UK, like, you know, adding £1 to this cause, how it's actually building, it's part of something much bigger. And so every bit that we can do can have a sort of a stronger impact. And so not to undermine actually this, sometimes we think we're only doing one thing, but that one thing has an impact on one person, and then that impacts, this person can then have a positive impact on another. So it has a growing effect. Yeah, and we also talked about the simple things that currently, like a hug, you know, giving a hug when somebody is not going through a good time, that's a sort of unnatural thing that we can't do it right now. That's something we would like to do. So writing handwritten notes and showing that we care about someone, or that we remember specific dates. So we focused on in a way small acts that can have a larger impact. And I'd love to.
Please invite anybody else from the group that you were in.
Yeah, Joanne, would you like to add?
We also touched a little bit on the colors, how colors play an important role. And I was just looking at the background, what Marianne had, the colors which were put over there. They're very inspirational, and those little things also make a lot of difference in your generosity.
Oh, interesting. Colors. Harriet, please take it on.
I think we started with what inspired us. So remembering acts and what was it that drove us to do that, and what encouraged us to continue. So it was perhaps getting a smile back, or some kind of validation because the person had shown in some way that they really appreciated the generosity. It's not that we were looking for that, but getting that feedback then encouraged us to do more.
And Claire?
Yeah, I was just thinking a lot about what you said before about being part of something bigger. And I was telling the story of how like communities have supported kind of like ourselves and each other over the last 12 months. And people might think that that one little thing they've done, whether it's checking on a neighbour or do some shopping for someone or put a bright picture up in the front window, might not sound a lot. But when you tell the story of actually it's a whole community and lots of people doing what seems like those really small things as well, that's a massive collective action that's made a huge difference. And I think sometimes we can almost undermine or undervalue ourselves and what feels like a very small act of generosity. But when you take into account what that feels like when it's lots of people acting in that way and how that might have inspired somebody else to do something similar, that's huge, and we shouldn't kind of lose track of that.
Yeah, not undermining these small acts.
Is that the whole group?
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, look, we've got, well, we'll finish at the top of the hour or half past the hour in India. Why don't we, how about this? We'll just do a round for everybody on the same principles that you just had, that if there's nothing to say, you just say pass, simple as that. So don't feel under pressure to speak. If there is something that you want to say as part of this group harvest, then please say it. It might be underlining something you've already heard. It might be adding something. It might be painting it a different color in some way. So let's just go around the room, and perhaps if I call you in the order in which you appear on my screen, which is starting with Salva. Salva, would you like to add anything? If you wish, just unmute and add anything if you wish.
Yes, the first thing I'd like to say is that I found being part of the group, Jane's group, very inspiring, and it was very interesting points of view that were raised there, and learned a couple of things. I found the image of the mask. I mean, masks are so much part of our lives these days, but quite powerful in explaining what it means to be generous when you yourself are not able to. And Blossom mentioned the idea of being the doormat. I would also, but I think before there's just a place slightly before that point where you might not have the strength or the amount or the time, and you still push yourself to give. And we often all find ourselves in those situations. And they do remain rewarding. Giving when you yourself don't have the money or the food or the time, mostly. I mean, spending time with helping somebody where you yourself are short of it. That's where I was like stopping. But yes, I realized that after that point, there's the oxygen mask part, which comes.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify that to the group. And thank you for sharing all your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Salva. So Jane, you're next on my screen, and then Sue. Jane, is there anything else you want to add? Maybe you think you've said everything.
I think it's just, I think it would be interesting maybe to reflect on how generosity looks different to different people. And so one person's idea of giving time, attention, or resource in some way might not really strike on the generosity scale with someone else's. And I think that's just quite interesting to reflect on. Again, I mentioned our group, I don't think generosity is like a binary thing. I think it's a continuum. And sometimes we feel better placed or better resourced to actually give more at certain points along that continuum. But if we are ourselves under pressure and in something, maybe we're suffering with some mental health condition, for example, and we do just a small thing of acknowledgement or phone a friend because we think of them, which may in other times not be considered particularly generous, it might just be routine. Under those circumstances, it classes as generous. So I think it's quite interesting to think about that and say, I don't think we can see what generosity looks like from the outside.
Yeah, thank you. Sue, if you want to say anything, please do, and then Joan. And then
so yes, thank you. I resonate with everything that's been said, and a couple of things that came to mind was I mean, one thing I learned as a child, I think my mother probably told us, and it's probably similar in most languages, is a smile is a gift you can give every day. So, you know, to go to what Jane was saying, you know, sometimes generosity is intangible. You don't know the impact of what you are giving can create. So I think that's quite a beautiful thing. And I think Joan meant a word that was came up when you were talking about conditions was appreciation, as kind of the, you know, that reciprocal nature of gratitude. It's not only the giving, it's the receiving and the appreciating and the feeding back. So it's you know, to me, it's like a loop that can grow and grow and grow, and it can start with something small. So yes, yeah. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to be finishing in just a few minutes. We were nearly at the top of the hour. Joan, Claire, and then Blossom, if you'd like to add anything.
I just wanted to clarify something Salva said. I only mentioned doormat in the context of the 10% who give so much and are being used, because I think we don't give in order to get something back. I think if you take the religious concept is to give without counting the cost and not looking for happiness at all. I think I'm somewhere in the 80% and that continuum that Jane has been talking about.
Wonderful. Yeah, I guess most of us are. Well, I'm certainly in that 80%. I think Joan, Claire, and then Kavita, if you want to add any final word.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring together what Sue and Jane said in terms of generosity is about what the person being generous is giving on the one hand, but also how it lands with the person receiving it or people receiving it. So for me, there's two sides to that coin. But yeah, very powerful. That I really liked your comment about the spectrum, but there's a spectrum on the other side, so the person receiving doesn't dismiss those acts.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. We are at the top of the hour. What I suggest is we continue. I mean, if you need to go, then please go. So we've had our hour, but otherwise let's continue the end of this circle and then we'll have a proper closing. So Claire, and then Kavita,
yeah, just
Pam. Yeah.
Just two tiny things. I was just thinking of something it just reminded me when Sue said something about smiling then. And I remember my daughter, when she was about 5, came back from school and said, we've got a new little girl in our class and she doesn't speak English and she doesn't understand me when I talk, but she understands me when I smile. I'm just feeling really proud of her for recognizing that in that moment. And I think for me, it's that the little things matter. I think sometimes we think it's got to be, I don't know, a big grand gesture or something on a big scale that can sometimes be more about us than other people, and not losing the fact of little things adding up make a really, really big difference.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What did I say? Kavita and then Pam, and then Rengin, you will have the last word in this round.
Sure. Thank you, Martin, and everybody. In fact, it's very inspiring to listen to all of you. But just one thing that triggered while Jane was talking about from our group is also in how it runs in a family, or how it runs in a culture when you look at it, because it's not only you, but it's coming from your mom or your grandmother who have been, compassionate, who have been, generous, and some things that you could learn from them. So that's something which just resonated with me and said, yes, this is the way how I've learned it. And from them, it comes from generations. And it's from your childhood that, the way how the behavior is, how you grow up, and how the culture comes in a very strong part of it. That's what just triggered my thought.
Very good. Thank you, Kavita. Pam, would you like to, do you have a last word? If you do, please offer it now.
One thing I would add is a surprising thing I learned from time banking and from being a time bank coordinator. And let's say I would, for a new time bank, and just give and doing lots of stuff for the time bank just to try to even help others set it up, and also helping your neighbor next door and so forth. one of the things I learned that surprised me was just the software that allows you to get sort of credit for the hours, even though you haven't turned them in to get any service for yourself. Just getting credit somehow, just being recognized for the number, like, felt really good to me. And it
Yeah.
that surprised me. I was like, I never thought that could be true. And I actually brought it up on one of the Time for All calls, which are phone calls for time bank coordinators. It's a time bank of time bank coordinators. And a couple people on the call said, wow, thanks for bringing that up. I never thought of that before. But it's like a surprising effect of just the hours, or just the numbers, you know.
Great. So it's being noticed in a way. And
Yeah,
I can chime with that as well.
like you're noticing it yourself, kind of, and feeling good about it.
Yeah. You notice your reaction, and I've got a recent experience of that as well. Oh, someone noticed. Oh, so it's, for those of us in the middle 80%, that probably helps us over the line. It helps us continue that noticing. Thank you. So Ringen has gone. She was in her car, as you probably saw. I don't know quite what happened there. So I think we have come to the end of their time. Thanks for staying on an extra 5 minutes or so. Can I ask David, Marianne, or Jane, is there anything that you want to say in conclusion, or I'll say the last word?
Yeah, I can jump in there. It's just a thing that keeps coming back to me that I heard recently, which is kind of, I find myself true and amusing at the same time. And it comes back to the idea of the doormat, and, you know, being in situations where you kind of have to push yourself to keep giving because, you know, people need your help. But I think it's, you know, if you don't give to yourself at some point, you won't have anything else to give. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with taking care of yourself before taking care of the others, like Pam was saying with the mask, which is, I'm used to hearing. But the thing I heard was, it's a bit like being open-minded, that sometimes if you're too open-minded, your brain falls out. So if you know, and it's the law of elasticity. You know, there's a certain point where you know, and it's not about getting back. It's just staying in a position of being able to give. So we have to be vigilant for ourselves and for others, that we can remain in this state of generosity, giving.
Thank you, Jane, Marianne. Any last word before I wrap up?
Nothing from me. It's been great. Thank you very much.
No, nothing from me either. It's been great.
Right. Well, I'll remember many things from this session, particularly the open mind, which I've not heard before. I can hear myself saying that in some other context at some point. So thank you for your time, Saturday morning, evening, whatever it is, to turning up to this. And there will be an opportunity. Well, I'll be writing, we will be writing. And should you be interested, there'll be an opportunity to be part of this prototype as it goes forward. As I said at the beginning, we're part of the Presencing Institute program over the next 2 months through till May. It's pretty exciting. And there are 380 groups doing all sorts of different things all over the place. Ours happens to be gratitude, generosity, happiness, but other people are doing a range of stuff. So it's, when you go on those sessions, it's like being plugged into the mains, really. You know, there's a lot of excitement and a lot of passion and a lot of positivity. So there is a core group, there's an extended group. It's possible, if you have some continuing interest, you could ask to be on the extended group, and then you can move in and move out. Jane, a little bit like you're doing. It's wonderfully that you've moved in today. Thank you. So if you have other commitments, then you can sort of lurk a bit and then get involved. So I'll be mailing about that, and be part of this growing movement of growing generosity, or choosing generosity, or whatever we may come to call it. So it's an intentional way of growing generosity, growing happiness, growing joy, getting bigger and bigger. So I think with that, I wish you a fine rest of the day, and thank you for being here. And let's all say our goodbyes. So,
thank you.
goodbyes.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye,
Bye.
everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye.